It is cold today. Really cold in Dallas, Texas. Really, really cold. And I need to wash my hair. So I'm going a little earlier than normal because, one, I'm putting Ava to bed early because she is cranky. And two, it's time to wash my hair and go to bed. I'm tired. I'm so tired. So, today's topic is when the fear mind is speaking. What does it look like? What happens when fear takes over your life? Well, I, for one, stop listening to and seeing any possibility. I get so scared and I get so disheveled that it's distracting. And I'm coming from a place of like, what ifs? And what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? Instead of, like, I was so focused today on all this fear of if things go wrong versus, oh yeah, remember that time when the thing goes right? Like, remember the time when it turns out well and it's actually really rewarding? My husband and I were like talking about all these risks and sharing with my mom all these fears. And she is like, she gets, she gets into it with me. She gets really worried too, and she's really fearful. And she's like, oh, maybe it's not for you. Like, maybe you shouldn't do this thing. Maybe you're putting your life at risk, and you could get assassinated. You could definitely get assassinated. You need bodyguards. And I was like, I'll just learn some self-defense. I'll learn some martial arts, and I'll teach my team members how to know martial arts, like if there's any risk involved or something. And so we really went down this rabbit hole, this tunnel of like fear and what ifs and all these situations. And then I thought about it, and I was like, maybe this is not for me. Maybe I shouldn't do it. And then I thought, wait a minute. I forgot about the other stuff. Like, I have examples of friends who have, we were talking about the foster care system. We were talking about like child welfare services and stuff. And I was reading all these articles where a lot of negative things happened when things fall through the cracks. And a lot of them were disturbing. And you're like, well, how did that happen? How were there not any red flags? How did we not catch this? And I could totally see it as a place of fear. And I could think about like the flaws of the social workers and the flaws of the agents that go out and interview people, or the people they come interview. Or I could think about like, well, if there's a predator out there trying to adopt a kid and the predator has no history, there's no red flags or anything, and they get access to a child, an innocent child, like what happens then? Like, is that predator also going to like possibly attack a agent if they come and talk to him or something? Like, there's all these fears and all of this stuff. And then I thought, gosh, like, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of opportunity here, there's a lot of things to fix. And I thought, wait a minute, I have friends who fostered kids and friends who are adopted, and they turned out really good. And some of them had eye-opening experiences, and then once they settled into how things worked, and once they found someone that they totally fell in love with, then they found ways to adopt that person permanently into their family. And there's just a exploration game, of the mind and exploring the possibilities out there. And it was eye-opening, and it was deeply eye-opening. And I thought about like if it would be something I would consider to be a part of. Like, I thought about like, what would it take for me as a mom who already has 2 kids to adopt or foster a kid, to add someone to the family. Like, what does it look like? And what is the best way to integrate it? And I used to watch a lot This Is Us, and there's like stories about adoption, and you kind of get a feel of what it feels like to have a third child come into the house and to see the dynamics and how it affects the kids and stuff. And I wondered, like, how would my kids be affected, and how would they embrace this person? And what if this person is like a delinquent, and then they have like all these bad habits that my kids pick up, like, had all this conversation, all this stuff. And I just thought so much of my dialogue was coming from a place of fear. And I think about instead, like, all the good that comes out of it when a person is raised in a healthy family, whether their biological parents were able to do it for them or not. And so they go into a foster system, they go into adoptive parents, and they end up growing up anyways, and they end up being healthy, and they end up being fulfilled, and they end up being a healthy, emotionally healthy adult that is very powerful, that influences a lot of people and become teachers and mentors themselves. Like, so much good can come out of it if we choose to see both sides of the issue. It was an eye-opening exercise, and I'm exhausted. I'm utterly exhausted. I am tired. I'm ready to go to bed, and I was thinking, what else could I share with you today that's very powerful, that could be profound? And my mom and I talked about, there's this one Buddhist spiritual leader. He's like the top-notch Buddha of all time. His name is called, if you translate to English, is something to the extent of like calm, peaceful Buddha. Like, imagine water that doesn't have any ripples in it. It's just very calm water that sits. And you could grovel at his feet and beg for you to save. You can beg him to save your life, and he will not save you. He will let you die. And we thought, and so some people complain, like, oh my gosh, he is like the worst Buddha of all time. He's so cold. He's so inhumane. He's so uncaring. Like, here I am begging for him to save my life, and he just lets me die. Like, what is wrong with him? I wonder if this is on Everett's thing or it's on my thing. I hope it's on my thing. I think it might be on Everett's, actually. I might be on Everett's Instagram channel instead of mine. I hope not. And so, like, this guy, he was, this Buddha, this highly enlightened Buddha, he wouldn't be affected by people crying. And one of the reasons why he's not affected when you're groveling at his feet, begging him to save your life, is because he really, really gets it. Like, he really gets on a cosmic level that when you die, you don't actually die. You just shed this human form and you do what there is to do next in your journey for your soul. It might be to incarnate into another human form, or maybe it's on to living in a different realm for a while and rest a bit before you do it again, or maybe you're finished with the whole cycle of birth and rebirth. But can you imagine, like, someone is groveling at your feet? You have the power to not allow them to die, and you let them die anyways. And the only reason why he would is because he knows that there's a natural progression of your life. And if it's time for you to die, then you will die. And if it's time for you to live, you will live. And when you move on to the next life, you're not actually dying. You're just shedding this jacket, this human form, and then you move on to the next stage. And my mom and I talked about, like, that is truly in a different type of, a different way of being. It is like being in this meditative state where you're not allowing the circumstances of the world to shake your emotional level. You are not succumbing to the fallacy of being a human being. You are beyond that. Like, you see what is happening before your eyes, and you look at it with objection, and you see what there is to fix. You don't panic, and you look for the solution to make sure that thing doesn't happen again, if it's really something that could be prevented. And it's such a powerful way of dealing with something that happens in your life versus panicking and crying and being upset and letting the emotions overtake you and prevent you from being very powerful in solving this challenge that you're faced with. And so we could all aspire to be like that famous Buddha that is not so affected and torn by someone's grief that he cannot function, that he is distracted, that he allows his heart to run the show. Like if there's something to do, he'll do it and he'll intervene. And if it's the natural thing and it's supposed to happen, then he'll let it be. And it's such a powerful way of being, right? It's coming from totally a place of choice instead of a place of like, oh my gosh, I have to do this. I don't have a choice in the matter. And you're not shackled by fear. You're not shackled by lack of choice. You're simply creating and seeing what there is to do and choosing how you're going to be and how you're going to respond and how you're going to feel about it. Like you get to decide, you get to choose. So powerful, right? So powerful. So that's my challenge to you this week, today, tomorrow. When you see challenging situations coming to you and you get the choice to interpret them, and you get to panic and have fear and freak out and cry and just lose yourself. If you do, that's fine. You are human. And then let it dissipate. Feel what there is to feel. And then decide, okay, if I got to choose powerfully and how this is going to go, what will I do next? What steps will I take? What questions will I ask? What will I learn from this experience? And what changes or what did I learn? What did I get out of it? What will I do going forward? What will I teach going forward? How will I mentor? How will I powerfully handle this situation? And see what there is to see. Like, so powerful, right? Be the Buddha. Be the Buddha. What else? Any other messages I have for you? That's it. That's all I can think of. That's it. Get lots of sleep. Get lots of rest. Stay warm. Hire a life coach in your life if you don't have one. And if you did not know, I'm a life coach. And I help people live very meaningful, fulfilling, powerful lives. That's what I do for a living. That's the power of having a life coach in your life. That's what she does. And I used to think that I was kind of like a victim of my circumstances and life just kind of happened to me. And sometimes I would be sad, sometimes I'd be happy, sometimes I'd pick my husband apart, sometimes I'd fight with him, sometimes something my mom said just triggered the crap out of me and I get so worked up and I get into this long conversation of why I'm right and why she's wrong and why does she have this kind of power over me, and I would get frustrated with my kids and lose it and all this stuff. And I was living in such a reactive way, like there was nothing intentional about what I did. Then finally, it hit me. And finally, I came to the conclusion, especially after hiring a life coach in my life, I realized that I was actually in control of my life. I got to choose how my life goes. And I actually create how my life is going to be. Like, you actually have the power. Did you know that? You have the power to live into the kind of life you desire. You have the power to live a soul expanded life. You have the power to live a life that is aligned with your soul's purpose and your soul's expansion and your soul, period, like you do. And I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know I had access to that. I didn't know I had it within me. I didn't know I could access it. I didn't know I had any power and any say. I just thought, I'm just on a person on this journey, following my destiny, and stuff will just happen to me, and I'll just deal with them the best that I can. And I was wrong. I was wrong because, thanks for all the love, Megan. I was wrong because you do have the power. You do really get to choose how you get to live your life. And any of us just don't know how. Like, I didn't think, like, I just thought, like, when you got married and you had kids, you get stressed out. You get fights with your spouse. And then, yes, some couples drift apart and sleep in separate beds. And it looks like I Love Lucy or something. And they just kind of coexist as friends forever. And I thought, that was just kind of like the natural progression of a marriage. You know, like people would just fight and they fall apart and they just coexist. And I realized that after I hired a life coach that I actually could be myself fully and share myself fully and be okay with whatever my husband says, no matter what he says. Whether I can see it as criticism, I can see it as love, I can hear it for what it is, I can just hear him out, give him the space to just be him, and just see what he says. And I could give it whatever meaning I decide to give it, and I could try to be right, I could be defensive, I could be angry, I could be worked up, I could be stressed out, I could be all that. Like, I could totally be like a total jerk about it if I wanted to be. Or I could have deep, meaningful, powerful conversations with him. I could allow him to be him. I could allow him to say what he says. I can allow him to cross his arms and be defensive and not judge him and just see how he is and how he's reacting and just be with what he says and realize that everything comes from love, is an expression of love, a call for love, a desire for love, or just simply is love. And sometimes it's in a warped, weird way where we just don't get it. And sometimes it's really obvious. You know, like when he gives me flowers, I write him a card or something, like it's really obvious that we care for one another and we love each other. And I learned that I actually had the power to have really deep, meaningful, powerful conversations with my husband if that was my desire and if that was my intention. And it was so freeing. It was so freeing to just be myself and share myself fully without inhibition about like how I'm going to be judged. Like, you know, for such a long time, I was so fearful of how my husband was going to judge me and how he would remember me. Like, it was such a big deal. And I finally came to grips that it doesn't matter. He will judge because all humans judge. He will think what he thinks. And when I was holding myself back, I was doing myself a disservice. I was suppressing my emotions. I was holding a part of my back. I was holding a part of myself back. And if I wasn't fully in the relationship, then it was so easy for me to suspect like infidelity and affairs and all this nonsense, because I was like, well, if I'm not in the marriage fully, then surely he's not in the marriage fully, and if he's not in the marriage fully, then surely he must be out there having an affair, right? Like it makes the most amount of sense. And so I've learned that sharing yourself fully, being there fully, being fully expressed with your husband, with your spouse, with your significant other is actually a choice. It's actually a choice. And yeah, it might feel weird and scary at first because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to fold. And you might have these inhibitions from your past where you think like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get judged. Like, what is he going to think of me? Or you can share what there's to share, and then he will be astounded and touched and reflect. He'll reflect deeply on the person he married and ask more questions to get to know me even better. And then in the process, I get to know him even better, and it builds a more intimate relationship because you actually get each other's perspective in a deeper level. That's the payoff, my friends. So take the plunge, take the risk. When there's something out there you're really resisting, something that's really triggering you, what there is to do is like dive right into it and see what it's about and start digging and uncovering stuff. Like the other day, I was about to write a terrible, nasty letter to the dealership and the GM and write to the Better Business Bureau and everything because I thought I was missing a spare tire in my car. And I asked my dad to check what it was. He goes, oh yeah, there's no spare tire in your car. So I called the dealership. I said, there's no spare tire in my car. You lost my spare tire. You must find it. How are you going to resolve this? And they had the worst response time. They never called me back. And I was so ready to write this letter. Before I even had the conversation that I was going to report them to the Better Business Bureau, that I was going to call the GM and write him an email and talk about it, I set the intention. I asked for help. And I asked the Heavenly Father and the multiverse to guide me with love and compassion and to to be directed in that way. And so I'm talking to my representative, and he's saying what he's saying, and I just gave him a break. I was just like, you know what, like, give him a chance to resolve the situation, right? So he promises me he'll have a solution by the end of the week. He doesn't call me back. I call him, so I was already kind of annoyed. And I asked him, okay, what's my resolution? What's my resolution? And he goes, we found a spare tire. It's not your spare tire, but if you want to come by and get it, then it's yours, because it was like $500 or something. And so I was like, okay, well, let me check if there's a jack. If there's missing a jack or something, then I will, then I'll let you know. Hopefully that's the only thing missing is the tire. So I go ask my dad to look at the trunk with me. He lifts up the flap. He goes, there's nothing there. Look, it's just empty. And I was like, well, lift up the other flap. So he lifts up one other flap, and guess what's there? The spare tire, the jack, the whole shebang. Like, my car was never missing a spare tire all this time. And I was about to go off on some guy and tell him what a horrible dealership he ran, that he lost my tire and he didn't even resolve it. Like, I had to help him resolve it. I was going to be like so mad and so right. And then when I saw that there was already a spare tire and a jack in my car, like, I was mortified. I was so mortified. And then I was really grateful that I didn't write the letter to the GM and to the Better Business Bureau, because then I would have to retract it and apologize. But what there was to do instead was just to apologize to the agent and say, I was wrong. The spare tire was in my car this entire time. And you're right. There is no spare tire laying around because it's in my car. Because he was like, we don't throw away spare tires. If we forgot to put in your car, it should be around here. But there's no spare tires laying around. I don't know where it is. So that is my analogy to the resistance and the trigger. When there is something there, the thing to do is to dig into there. Lift up the flap. Lift up the next flap. See what's down there. And that is where you'll find the treasure. That's where you'll find the good. That's where you'll see, like, oh, this is what I learned about myself. I didn't know that about myself. Wow, I really learned something powerful about myself. That's where the digging happens. That's where the soul expansion happens. That's where you learn about yourself. And it's also where you actually have the power to transform yourself. Like, you know, like, for the longest time, I was just so scared of money and talking about money and being healthy with money and looking at all my expenses and my credit card bills. Like, I just thought if I just didn't know it, then it was just going to be fine. It was just going to work itself out. Luckily, my husband is very responsible financially, so I'm like, oh, I'll just let him deal with it. I don't have to deal with it at all. And instead, I realized that when I looked into it and I dug into it and saw what there was to see, then I saw that, oh, I can manage to have a life coach in my life every single month if I desire to, because I actually had the financial ability to do it. I just didn't think I even had it. And when I was more strategic and intentional about my expenses, then I actually could afford to have a life coach in my life. I could afford it. So, get a life coach in your life. Look at your expenses. You probably could afford one. You just don't even know. And also dig into your triggers. Dig into your resistance. Like, really lift up the layers. Lift up the flaps. Check it out and see what there's to see. And you'll realize amazing things about yourself. And the last lesson, of course, is don't let fear run the show. Be okay with the fear. See what there is to see. And then be like the Buddha. The one that is in control of the situation, looks at things very powerfully, processes the emotion, and then lets it dissipate, and then move on to how to resolve the situation. It's that powerful. You are that powerful. You are that magnificent. Did you know that? Did you know you have the power to live in that way? Yeah, I didn't either until I hired a life coach. So, if you didn't know, I'm a life coach. If you're looking for a life coach, if my message resonates with you, please share this video with your friends and your family, your network, and go to my page and like it. If you can support me and send me love in that way. My website or my like page is called Soul, S-O-U-L, Elevated Life. Soul Elevated Life. I have a YouTube channel, I have an Instagram channel, a Facebook channel, a website. Everything is called Soul Elevated Life. And reach out to me. Send me a message, send me an email, send me a message through Facebook or Instagram. text me, call me, email me, whatever. I don't care how you get to me, just get to me. That's Train, by the way, who sings Drop of Jupiter, if you didn't recognize that song. I think it's like on the second CD, third CD. So, get to me. I don't care how you get to me, just get to me. Reach out to me, get my attention. Hire me to be your coach. If you're not sure, we can have coffee, we can have lunch, we can do a quick video conference, an interview, see if we're a good match for one another, and then we'll go from there. And then, if you didn't know you had access to all that stuff, you didn't know you had the access to live a powerful life, then that's where I come in. That's what I do as a life coach. This is what I do for a living. This is my sole purpose. This is something I'm really gifted at, and this is my God-given ability and skill. Nothing I could give you, you don't already have. Everything you need, everything that you would like to bring into existence, like you already have. Like I just simply give you and guide you to accessing it, to using it, to leveraging it, to really live your most fulfilling, meaningful, profound, infinitely powerful life. That's what I do. And if all that sounds great and you would love access to all that, then what there is to do is to hire a life coach in your life. And if I resonate with you and you like my message, you like my energy, then there's probably a reason. Your soul is telling you something. So, sending you love, light, profound clarity, and infinite possibility to create the life you desire to live. Here's to you living a soul elevated life, and I will see you tomorrow. Sending you lots and lots and lots and lots of love.